You might not use a third of what it spits out and gives you but other times it's like, oh, I didn't even think of using that one, but it's just, it helps with your planning. It's all there to help you, isn't it? And it's not going to go away. So why don't we embrace it? And
hi there, I'm Charly, your online business manager and WordPress expert. My goal is to assist small to medium business owners build their businesses with a focus on using the internet and online technologies in an appropriate and cost-effective manner. People hire me to take the stress out of managing their businesses and allow themselves to focus on what they do best. Today, I've got a fellow Aussie with me. Yay! I love speaking to Aussies. Lyndal Harris is a podcast consultant and is passionate about simplifying your podcasting journey and getting your message out to the world. And I am so looking forward to having a chat to Lyndal. We were just having a bit of a chat before the call, and we've got some great stuff to talk with you guys about today. So Lyndal, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. Now, listen, I gave people a very brief overview of who you are. Why don't you give us that helicopter view of who you are, what you do, and we'll get into some great topic today.
Absolutely. Well, we've known each other for, gosh, what did we work out? About 10, 12 years. It's been a long time since we met. I started back in business in the virtual assistant world in Australia back in 2012. And I worked in there doing different sorts of things, a little bit of admin for people, marketing. And in 2015, I was helping a client launch a podcasting conference here in Australia. And when I was in the room, I realized not a lot of people were offering podcast support here in Australia at that time. And as a VA and very active in the Australian VA industry, I don't think anyone had niched into podcasting support. Well, I know now that no one had niched into podcast only support at the time. And so I went away from that conference, learned everything about podcasting, because in fact, I was in the conference and not understanding what it actually took to put a podcast together. And so I left. I did a certification through VA Classroom at the time. VA University, I think, is Freelance University now, and learned everything there was about podcast production and started offering it to my current clients. And in 2016, my husband was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. And so I knew that I had to do something. I have two young kids. They were 6 and 8 at the time. And I knew I had to do something with my business to make sure that I could keep running my business while being a solo parent, caring for Si, but afterwards being able to have something that was sustainable on a single income and raising the kids without having to go back to full-time employment. And that was when I took all of my learnings, I guess, from being a VA or in business even, and going to conferences and workshops and really putting together a business that was based on packages, that was, I built a team and that I could scale so that when I needed to, I was able to take a step back and be there for the family. And it's just taken off ever since. I can't believe it's been 8 years since I niched and created Podcast VA, and it's still going strong today. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story. We've morphed a little bit in what we offer. When I started, we really offered the done for you services in podcasting, where we would help you launch and we would then help you manage all of the tasks in post-production. And we still do that, but we also offer podcast training, some coaching, strategies and audits and things like that as well.
Fantastic. Now, look, I am so sorry. I did not realize that about your husband. So my condolences. I know it's probably a while ago, but still I am sorry. That's
thank you.
A hard thing. But I think it's also wonderful that you had your business that you could work with and still be there for the kids when they needed you, which is great.
And sometimes it is those hard moments where we really take a look at life and think, okay, what do we need to do here? And it was a really, obviously, a horrible time, but it also, I wouldn't be here in Podcast VA doing this had I not had that sort of push to have to do something. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, Well, here we are today. Now, where are you? Are you in the East Coast or the West Coast of Australia?
I'm in Brisbane, in Queensland.
You're in Brisbane.
I am.
Wow, we're nearly neighbours at the moment. I'm up in a place called Buxton at the moment, which is just a little north of you on the coast, up near Harvey Bay.
I was going to say just north of the Sunshine Coast, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, I'm going to be in this area for the next couple of months, and then I'm going to head back up to the Atherton Tablelands, I think.
Ah, lovely.
This is what we do.
I love it. I guess just pick up the laptop and yeah, I love that. I didn't realize you're in Buxton. There you go. And up to isn't it nice that you can pick it up and go and travel and move around and do still
I'm enjoying this weather. This weather is just well worth it.
Absolutely.
All righty, so let's have a chat about podcasting. I know that most people will go through the why is podcasting important for business, and I think it's a really good place for us to start. Let's talk about why should people podcast? Why should they be doing what I'm doing here?
Yeah,
then we'll get into some of the let's see if I can trip over my tongue today. Tips, trips, and tricks and traps. I did it. There you go.
I usually try tips and tricks, and I still fall over that. So, look, I think I'm really passionate about businesses using podcasting as a platform to really market their business, because I get a lot of people that will ask me now in 2024 if it's too late to start a podcast. Have they sort of missed the boat? It's been something that businesses have been doing for a long time. And obviously there was such a massive boom in podcasting when COVID hit. You know, I was trying to think about it this morning. I don't have the exact figures, but I remember when I started in 2015, there was about 500,000 podcasts on Apple Podcasts, because that's all there was. There was no Spotify. There was no YouTube for podcasts as such. There was no Amazon. It was the platform that people were listening on. And even prior to COVID, there was 700,000 or so podcasts in the directories. And there were other directories like Spotify and everything coming on by then. During COVID, millions of podcasts were launched. And so now in the podcasting index, there's a roughly 4.2 million podcasts available. But the thing I love about the podcast index is they also break down the stats of how often podcasts are publishing episodes. And in the last 90 days, only 11% have published an episode. So if you break those numbers down, it's 470,000. Let's take it up to 500,000 podcasts are actually publishing on a regular basis. Now, that doesn't take into account that there are a lot of podcasts that have evergreen content that don't need to be publishing all the time. And maybe that's something we'll talk about in a little bit, because that can still be a really successful podcast. But coming back to comparing those numbers, 470,000 or 500,000 podcast episodes or podcast shows produced an episode in the last 90 days. There are millions of blogs. In fact, there's 7.5 million blogs posted every day. That's more blogs posted every day than there are podcasts in the index. And then that doesn't, and I don't even know the numbers for books and YouTube channels and things like that. So podcasting isn't saturated, but it's not the same for someone to launch a podcast now in 2024 as it was for someone pre-COVID who could find an audience a little bit easier because it wasn't quite as crowded. But if you go to start about why would you start a podcast for your business, it's really about starting at that strategy level and, what's the message that you want to share with the world? Why do you want to do it? Who's your target audience? And then working out your objective. So is it to raise your brand awareness, to position yourself as an expert in your industry? Is it for collaborations, to be guests on other people's shows, but to also reach out to people that you might not otherwise be able to connect with as easily and ask them onto your podcast? It might be that you just want to improve your speaking and communication skills, or even just have that hub of something in your marketing that you can repurpose and use across all of your channels. So yeah, lots of different reasons you can launch a podcast for your business, and so many opportunities.
So I really love that you gave those statistics there. That no one's actually been able to give me those statistics, so that's fantastic. I'm not surprised that it is as low as 11% are updating their content on a regular basis. Was that 7 days, 10 days? It was some
90 days, 3 months.
90 days.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's even it's going to be less for the 30 days, and so.
And that's across all of your categories. It's really it's really interesting when you break the numbers down.
Me. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and it does surprise me in that you'd think people would do more, but as with a lot of things, I think people get into that bug of, I'm going to do this, it's going to be easy, and then it's not so easy. And you've got to, what do I post about, and how do I do this, and it's just so much work, so it just sort of falls off, or other things take over. But let's have a chat about, you mentioned the reasons as to why you would start a podcast, and being clear when you start your podcast as to why you're doing it. You mentioned evergreen content, and I kind of went, well, why would you do an evergreen content podcast? Why wouldn't you just put that up on your website as a series of audios that people can listen to, or videos that they can watch? What is the difference between doing an evergreen podcast and some of the others?
And I love this question because I can use myself as an example. I absolutely. The difference between a podcast as such and, let's say, audio that you house onto your website is that a podcast is, I won't even get into the argument of whether it's video and audio, because in the podcasting world, traditionally they're talking audio. So let's just take it from an audio perspective. If I have a season of 10 episodes and I put that onto my website, I need to host it somewhere because it's going to quickly crash my website with the size of the audio files. Yep. So to have it through a podcast hosting platform, it allows me to embed it onto the website to not take up all that space. But then I have the opportunity to put it onto the directories really easily. So my question would be, it really comes back to working out the strategy. And when I train people with when they're launching a podcast, we always start with strategy, and it starts to unfold why you do it that way. Because if you were doing a podcast to share your frequently asked questions for somebody who's potentially going to work with you, then maybe you would have it so that it is still on a podcast host, but it's housed on your website and people can listen to it. And maybe you don't put it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of the directories. But if you want to raise that brand awareness, and if that could be a secondary kind of benefit, then why not put it out onto those directories? Because it's not going to sort of do you any harm to have it there, for example. So coming back to my example, I put out 3 seasons of 10 episodes back in 2020. And my podcast is a short podcasting tips and tricks show. And there was a couple of reasons I did it. One of them was that I really wanted to be able to say, I have walked in your shoes when I'm launching podcasts, because for 5 years, obviously what had happened with my family situation, I didn't launch a podcast. And it got to a point where people would say to me, so what's your podcast? And I'd be like, well, actually, I don't have one. And I'd explain to them why, but then I got, okay, I just do want to know this process from their walking in their shoes. So I did 3 seasons, 10 episodes. And then again, life for me just, I moved the kids and I was caring for my mum, and it was just too difficult to have an ongoing show that everybody hears about, this ongoing weekly or fortnightly show. So for me, what I did is I had the containers or the seasons of 3, lots of 10 episodes. I had 30 episodes, and I continued to market those and promote those episodes whilst I wasn't publishing. So I used them in nurture sequences. I would, after someone had downloaded a lead magnet, I would, occasionally, and probably not often enough, I would repost it on my social media posts. If someone asked me a question, I would be able to send them to that particular episode so it explained it. If someone came on and did a discovery call, in my follow-up email, I would say, have you listened to my podcast about podcasting? Here's the link to it, because that would give them information about launching their show. And it kind of builds that relationship with them without you having to do a lot of the one-on-one talk. So if they were going to look for 2 or 3 different podcast support people, I have a podcast that might be what gets me over the line to win that client, as opposed to someone who doesn't have a podcast. So to a lot of people, and it kind of goes against what a lot of podcast consultants or experts might say, where they, having that ongoing show is the best way to grow your show and to find a new audience. Absolutely. But you don't have to have it that way, and you can still call it a podcast. So the podcast being, if it's through the host and someone has followed the show or subscribed to the show, then they're going to know when a new episode lands. So then I now, this year in 2024, released another season, and it's been, a red hot couple of years and since I had done one, but I still kept active on my socials. I was building my community. And when I released my podcast in March this year, I didn't make a massive, I announced it obviously when I launched it, but I didn't do any sort of teasing that I was going to do it. I just was like, okay, get it done, start releasing the episodes. And I announced it to everybody. And I hit number 8 in the business marketing charts in Apple. And I'm not trying to say that as a brag. Thank you. But I know that sounds like a bit of a brag. But what I'm trying to say is the fact that I had that as a podcast, all the people that had subscribed 3 or 4 years ago got the notification that okay, Podcasting Tips and Tricks has a new episode. I'm going to listen to that. And that's what got me up into the charts, because people were following. And that's the advantage of a podcast over just housing it onto your website. But look, certainly people can still take advantage of the audio or the video by putting it onto their website. The difference with podcast as such is it's delivered through a platform where people can subscribe or follow.
Right. Excellent. And I'm glad you made that clarification for us. So, there's Apple, there's Apple and Spotify are the 2 big ones. I know that some people have put their podcasts out on YouTube and the video platforms. As you said, there's a bit of a thing about podcast is audio, not video.
There is. Now, and the interesting thing is, as we speak, Google Podcasts is closing down. So YouTube is now becoming the Google's platform for podcasts. And so you're going to see a lot of audio podcasts over on YouTube. And it's really so that they can have that platform through YouTube as itself, and also YouTube Music. So it's an interesting distinction there. But I think one thing I would love to say is, whilst I say podcast is perfect for business, it can be exactly what you just said, in that it can be a series of audio or video that is going to help your client. But it all comes back to, or your potential client, and it all comes back to, what is the objective of doing your show? And I'll give you a really quick example. I've got a real estate agent friend here in Brisbane. He's been on a few podcasts. He absolutely loved it. He's really outgoing. He's got that personality that is great. It comes across really well. But he's a local real estate agent. He only wants to work in quite a small area. And so he said, but I don't want to do a weekly podcast. I don't want to report on the market and all of that kind of stuff. So we talked about, for him, why don't you have a season or a lot of episodes for someone who's getting ready to sell their house, and have another season of people who are getting ready to buy their dream home. And then when you meet them, you are doing an appraisal on their house, or, through your networks, they can actually go and know that they can listen to you or watch your video, and you're already building that relationship with them. They're getting to know you without you having to spend that one-on-one time with them. So there's so many different ways to use what we'll call a podcast, whether it's the audio or video, and yeah, so many different great ways for businesses to use it to help them in their marketing.
I also love the way that you're using it in your nurture sequences. And for those that are so going, nurture sequences, what the hell is she talking about?
Yeah.
That's the sequences you send out, the emails that you send out to people on a regular basis, just to keep your prospects warm, or warm them up so that when they're ready to buy, they remember that you're there. They remember that you're one of the people that they originally looked at for whatever it is the problem they were trying to solve. That's
especially with a lead magnet. If they download a lead magnet, so I have a lead magnet on my website that I promote around the place. If they download that, I know they're interested in launching a podcast. So my follow-up email will be, here's the link to the email to the lead magnet you just downloaded. And then in the 3 or 4 follow-up emails, there'll be here's a link on, how to launch your podcast. And here's a link on how launching a podcast changed this person's business. And here's a link to, so it's almost like it's, in those emails, I'm directing traffic back to listen.
Yeah. And it's using the different episodes in different ways to do different things, but it's all there. You've done the content once. You don't have to do it again, which is lovely.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, in this day and age, people do a bit of stalking if they're going to look for a new, say, service or a coach or whatever. They're going to do their due diligence. And if you've got a podcast or something that they can go and listen to, hear your knowledge and your experience, then that is helping you build that relationship automatically.
Yep. Look, I got to say, I have subscribed to so many podcasts just because I've gone through and gone, I wonder, oh, look, this person's got a podcast. Let me go and listen to what they have to say. And if I don't like what they've got to say on their podcast, I'm not likely to go back and do business with them. But there's so many that I've kept on my list because they're good, they're nice, they're interesting to listen to, they're great people, they've got lots of fun. And then when you go and do business with them, like, I've been listening to your podcast for years. Oh, have you?
And you feel like you know them, don't you? It's funny when you meet people that you've listened to their podcast, because you're like, I feel like I know you. And it's just that it's a tool that builds that intimate relationship in a way that no other can. So video and audio, I'm not going to say that one's better than the other, but words on a page just can't do it the same way.
No, and I still think you need the words on a page to offset the audio on the video. But yeah, I mean, it's the know, like, and trust thing about they get to see you, they get your voice, they see your face if you're doing video. They can see whether you're an authentic person, whether you're like to be slightly more buttoned up, relaxed, whatever it is, they get to know you.
Exactly. And if you put people off because you're not what they expect or what they want, then that's good, because that saved you. It saved you what might not have been a great working relationship. And so that's it. You don't need to worry about whether that is going to turn people away rather than bring them in. Just be yourself. And I think that it's really important that you are yourself, because if you try and change, that's where you'll start to find that you won't be relaxed. You won't be yourself, and it becomes difficult.
Absolutely. All righty. So there's the reasons as to why we want to become podcasts or have podcasts. And I think they're great reasons, and really encourage people to think about how they can pull this into their business. Reach out and ask for help if you're not sure, of course. The other things are, what are some of the tips and traps, not tricks, but the tips and the traps that people fall into when creating their podcast? I know one of the ones that you've sort of highlighted a couple of times without sort of you've delved into it a little bit, is the regular episodes, the fact that I've got to keep getting content out there. That is one of the problems that people launch podcasts and it doesn't go anywhere. You've given us one solution for that, but let's have a chat about that.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting one. A lot of people start, and this has been, I've heard this for 9 years, and it's really, really interesting. A lot of people will start with, okay, I want to do a podcast. I know that podcasting is a great idea. So I'm going to go buy a microphone and I'm going to plug it in and I'm going to start recording. And they haven't sat down and done that whole strategy piece first. which just, it, as I said before, everything kind of unfolds out of that. If you're doing a podcast because you want to be raise your brand awareness, but also your profile to position yourself as an expert in a certain industry, solo episodes do that a lot quicker than interview episodes. Interview episodes do work like that if you, but you need to be, it takes a little bit longer, and you need to think about how you conduct the interview so that you're also showing your skills and knowledge and experience and not just asking questions. So then you start to think, okay, well, if I want to have an interview show, but I also want to build my, position myself as an expert, then maybe I'll do a combination of both solo episodes and interviews. And how am I going to do those interviews? Am I going to do them in person in a studio or in an office, or am I going to do them online over Zoom? Because then you're looking at different, and I say Zoom, there's so many others as well. Obviously, there's Riverside, there's Descript and Squadcast, there's lots of different platforms. But that's a very different proposition to the equipment that you're going to buy for someone who's going to go and sit across the table and have the interviews in person. So starting with the equipment is a mistake that people make. Going back to the strategy, and rather than just jumping in and thinking I'm going to have this ongoing sort of weekly episode or fortnightly episode, something just to go back and answer the weekly sort of ongoing episode style is, it doesn't need to be weekly. It can be fortnightly. And I would probably say that monthly doesn't necessarily get the traction to grow your show. But again, that comes back to, what's the objective of your show? Because if your objective isn't to find this big new audience, then maybe monthly works for you. So it's really about sort of coming back to that. And then some of the other traps. Probably one of my biggest things mistakes that I see is people jumping into groups and saying, hey, what's your recommendation on a microphone? Because different microphones work differently in spaces and depending on where you're going to record. So, I mean, if you're watching the video, you can see I've got a few microphones behind me here. One of those microphones used to be perfect in my last office, but it's terrible in this one because I've got floorboards and I've got a big window beside me, and there's a lot more reverb in this room, which creates a lot more echo. And so when people say, oh, what microphone should I get? Yes, it's good to get a recommendation, but the first thing you need to do is work out, am I recording in an echoey space? Am I recording where there's a lot of background noise? Because that will make a difference on the microphone that you purchase. And probably one of the most, let's say, popular recommendations or recommended microphones for podcasting is one that I would never recommend. And a lot of podcasting experts will say the same thing. They're not necessarily recommending that one because it's very sensitive to the noise that it picks up, and half the people don't use it properly in the way that it's set up. And so little things like that can make a big difference, because what you do want to aim for now is your audio quality needs to be good. People won't listen if you're starting afresh now. I shouldn't say they won't listen. You need to, if you're starting afresh now and you haven't really got an audience, you do need to be mindful of the listener's experience, and that includes your audio quality.
Yep, and that's something I've heard from so many people, and I hope my audio quality comes out okay. I spent a lot of time playing around with different microphones, and because I work in different locations, I had to choose one that I could easily move, works well, and then I went to an application that actually cuts out all my background noise, and it just...
Exactly. And there's so many tools now, and I know we touched on AI, I think, before we started the episode, but there's so many tools now that can help with that, noise knocking out and reduction before you even start recording, or if you record it with the noise in there, being mindful of what you can do in your editing process. That sort of, I guess it's a case of you don't use your laptop microphone. if you've got no budget if you've really got no budget, you're better off to use the headphones that come with your mobile and use the little microphone on that, or even just placing the mobile right in front of you on a shelf, on a pile of books or something, and talking straight into that, because your laptop microphone it's not going to give you. Yeah,
it's terrible. Yeah, it's
is
really, really low quality. And I love those ideas about, your headphones that come with your mobile are normally spot on. Honestly, they're some of the best quality things that I've ever seen for the price point that they come out at. You've got headsets. If you've got a headset with a boom mic, make sure you've got that round right in front of your mouth, and you're talking into it.
And actually, before you start talking, just put it into a position and ask your host to tell you if you've got any plosives happening, because you might not hear that you've got it in the wrong place, but do a little test, because honestly, when you hear a host who's put that little mic on and it's in the wrong position and there's so many plosives, it's not a good listener experience. And where people, yes, absolutely. Sorry, that was a very technical term I didn't explain. A plosive is, so if I move closer to my microphone and I'm saying, my podcast, perfect planning, blah, 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 can hear it with the P and the B's and the T's, they often have a harder sound. And a lot of microphones can pick them up and really, you almost feel like you can hear them when they're not managed properly. So if you're going to do a podcast as a host, I would always suggest, if you've got even just a really small budget, get a microphone that plugs straight into a USB straight into your laptop, and you can get them for under $100. That is a much better experience than recording into your phone and what have you. If you've really got no budget, you could use that. But otherwise, if you've got a small budget, go and get the little Audio Technica ATR 2100. Sold out through COVID. It was the most popular microphone because it's around $100. I think it's less than $100. Plugs in via USB, and it just does, generally in most spaces, it's a really good little microphone to start with.
Yep, and they're great. They're great starting quality. And I think one of the things that I've heard other people say, and it would seem that you are also recommending, is don't spend a heap of money right up front.
No.
Get yourself set up, get yourself started, work out what works, try out different things. I mean, I can see you've got looks like you've got 3 separate microphones on the shelf over there.
I've got 2 with my, but 9 years in podcasting. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I will speak to most people and say, start small. So if you want to go for the ATR 2100, it's around that $100 mark, if that. The next one up, Rode, over there. Rode brand is amazing. It is one of my favorites for podcasting gear, but you start to go up in price, and you do not want to spend a lot of money and then go, actually, I don't really love podcasting. I don't really love this. And I've just gone and spent $1,000 on buying mixers and microphones and stands and headphones and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, I've got it because I've been in podcasting for a little while, and I need to obviously walk the talk, but you can get away. I know podcasters that have been podcasting for 5 years with that ATR 2100. They use their headphones that they get with their mobile phone, because you don't need to have these big headphones. This is good for editing. I edit a lot of podcasts. You don't need to have them, but that's right. And so really a microphone and your headphones that you get with your mobile is enough to get going for $100. See if you like it. If you love it and you really want to start to upgrade your equipment as you go, you can do that. But don't start by spending thousands of dollars on equipment to then realize this is not really what I want to do. And then you've got to try and sell the gear. And it doesn't necessarily sell that quickly, to be honest. Even though it's all good gear, sometimes it's hard to sell, and you don't want to waste that money. I did actually, again, I'm going to go back to saying, and I know I harp on about it a lot, going back to your strategy, because at the same time, if somebody says that they're going to their main objective is to go to conferences and workshops and catch people and interview them when they're there, because that's exactly what their podcast objective is to talk to different guests in an environment like a conference, where they might be able to say, hey, can you come and talk to me for half an hour? That's a very different setup of equipment again than it is just getting a USB microphone. So it really does. It's how you're going to record and things like that before you get started, to actually work out the strategy, work out the equipment, work out your format, and let it roll from there.
Yeah, see, you're a lady speaking to my heart here, because strategy is king as far as I'm concerned. People come to me and say, hey, listen, we want to do this thing. I'm like, okay, what's your objectives?
Yes.
We just want to do this thing. Okay.
And sometimes maybe they go, I don't want to do this big strategy.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a one-page strategy, and we'll just block it out as we go along. But you've got to have your strategy. You've got to know what your base objectives are, what your short-term, even if it's just a short-term objective, to know that you've met that, that's your success criteria, and whether you want to keep going forward. Because at that point, you've got a yes and a no decision, or you've got a maybe we'll keep going, or maybe we'll just divert something else.
I love that you just said that too. It's success criteria and strategy, because you're right. It does not need to be, I'm not talking about a 10-page document. It can be a one-pager that answers 5 questions, and they could probably literally be answered in 2 or 3 sentences, some of them. So it doesn't need to be massive. Some people will really go into more detail. But that success factor is exactly right. How will you know if you consider your show as a success? Because the last thing you want to do is compare your numbers with someone else, because that is just like comparing apples and oranges. It is not the same. You don't know what their audience is, their topic is. They might have different groups that they're part of. Do not ever compare your numbers to somebody else. Okay, it might be nice to have a bit of a ballpark and know what's happening. But I know someone who podcasts for a few years now and might get, say, 30 to 40 downloads per episode every week. Now, to some people, they might say that's not a successful podcast.
That's a great podcast.
Her, that's right. To her, that's like having 30 people come and listen to her talk about a different subject every single week. It provides her something to go and repurpose her content around. And she's really happy with that. So you can't say a successful podcast is someone who gets thousands of downloads, because here's the caveat here too. Not many business podcasts get thousands of downloads. And so really having that mark of success and working out what is success to you. If 15 people listen to your podcast every week, are you happy with that? And take it back to your objective, because podcasting's not hard. This might be the next thing that we'll get into to talk about. Podcasting's not hard once you get going, but it is a lot of work. So you do want to have that, know what that success factor looks like for you, so that you can decide whether to continue or whether to wrap it up into a season of content that you just want to sit onto your website, and really consider all those options.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just loop back a little bit about, don't compare your numbers, because if you look at podcast numbers in general, you're going to be looking at people like the Joe Rogan Experience. I don't know how many that guy gets, but oh my goodness. First of all, Joe Rogan did not start out with those sorts of numbers. I will guarantee you that. And he also started out that podcast from a very, very different base to which most business owners will. That's Absolutely. The first part. The second part is a business podcast is going to be a very niche podcast. It's going to really have a very slim segment that is going to appeal to. You're not going to get a swathe of people that are interested in what you're talking about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And as long as you know what your strategy is, that's okay.
That's so true. It's so true. Business podcasts are a different kettle of fish. Really, they really are different to entertainment style podcasts, true
right.
crime, religion, sport. They're all very different categories to business. And let's be honest, if you're not a business, I'm going to say that the wrong way. It depends on who your market is and whether they actually listening to podcasts, because it's just not the same as for a lot of businesses. Now, that depends. So I'm going to just put myself back as an example here because I just fumbled over what I was trying to say. My podcast is trying to appeal to people who are podcasters or interested in podcasting, generally in a business sense. And if you listen to my podcast, not coming from a business sense and you want to do a hobby or passion style project, then you'll still get information that's relevant. But you'll hear that I talk more about businesses in podcasting. Now, if I'm a business, I don't appeal to as many people, I should say, in that area, as opposed to a business who, let's say, does fertility or something for pregnant mums, or even for mums. It's a totally different audience, is what I'm trying to say. And so the entertainment style podcasts are, really across the board for anybody that's interested in that topic. Right. And a lot of the famous podcasters, they come with an audience, they come with a network. I had somebody say to me a few months ago, Mel Robbins launched at number 1. And this person is, I'm so excited because they are really passionate about having a massive, successful podcast. And she said to me, I want to launch at number 1. That's my goal. And I was like, launching at number 1 doesn't happen. You can't actually say it in your podcast episode at number 1 episode. I can't believe we've launched at number 1 in Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because the way the algorithm works is it doesn't happen that way. The charts work, the algorithms work. You can hit number 1 after you launch. Absolutely. I'm not saying that's not possible. But Mel Robbins was on a network. She's famous. She's got millions of people that she already had before she launched her podcast. So you've got to be realistic when you're comparing with other people.
Absolutely. Now, you alluded to it's a lot of work. And I have to say, I started this one up and I knew how much work it was because I had done video tutorials and I've been doing quasi this sort of thing for years, where I would edit my own tutorials, I would put them up, I'd edit them, I'd broadcast. So much work. Doing this every week, having it ready to go every week. It's a significant.
It's a massive commitment, isn't it?
Yeah. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
I love this part because, when I talk to podcasters or people that want to launch a podcast, I have this great image of someone's head just, exploding with, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. How am I going to launch this? And how am I going to get it onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts? And I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do the tech. No, I've got this great idea for a podcast and I'm not going to do it because it's just too hard. Or they'll go and start Googling and YouTubing, and that can get you in a whole different pickle because different ways to do things all the time with podcasting particularly. And so when you've launched your show, actually a lot of those launch tasks are one-off tasks, and then you can get into quite a systemized process of the same thing every time you do an episode. Now, you can break the podcasting workflow down into, there's various iterations of it. It could be 3 Ps, 5 Ps, whatever. But you can break it very clearly into separate workflows. And the pre-planning of your show is, it's about your content. It's about working out what episode order, but then it's about booking your guests, getting their headshot, getting their bio, getting their social links and their website links, and getting all of that information from your guest up front, because this is something I learned over the years of supporting podcasters. Yep. The last thing you want to be doing is afterwards going, okay, we've recorded the episode. That was great. Loved it. Now send me your headshot. And then they send a headshot and then you say, but I haven't got your bio, and you're trying to, scratch around and get it all together. So having these workflows and processes in place make it a little more simple, but you've got to do all of that and do the booking arrangement for your guest, and then get on the episode with your guest and hope that there hasn't been too many cancellations or someone's fallen sick. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff in the beginning. If you do an interview show, you still want to do have an idea of what you're planning for your overall season or what your next few episodes look like. And then you want to know, what am I going to talk about in those episodes? What's the point of having those episodes? Is there going to be a call to action that's specifically about that episode? And then planning the episodes, sort of outlining or dot pointing your scripts. Then you do your recording. Then you do the editing, and editing's a whole interesting kettle of fish in itself,
Yes,
because some people will edit to the nth degree and other people will go, no, I'm going to, maybe edit out some mistakes or where we went off track, but I'm going to pretty much put it up as the recording that it is. And other people will spend that, and that can take, let's say, maybe 15 minutes to half an hour on let's just put our intro and outro on and get it to the levels and things like that, as opposed to someone who spends 5 hours content editing, removing all their ums and ahs, taking it all, splitting it up and saying that part of the conversation should be back here and I'm going to take that and cut it, and that's a whole different thing. So
wow.
Let's just say editing is a whole thing in itself that you could, either do really quickly or quite a lot of. Then after the editing, you've got the publishing, and you need to have an episode graphic. You need to have your show notes or your description written and all your links done and everything ready to go and publish that through the host. And then if you're a business owner, I would hope that you would have it on your website as well. So then you've got to just make sure that that's gone scheduled or gone live on your website. And that's just the podcast production workflow. After that, or the last part of that, is the promotion. And that's where
just social media and all the stuff that then comes in from that.
All the marketing that you need to do. You can't just release an episode and then go, great, cool, it's done. You have to go and do the marketing and get it out there and get it in front of your audience.
You can.
You can.
Go very well.
Again, it comes back to what's your objective.
But yeah, and look, honestly, I can say that I finally got someone in to give me a hand, because I was doing it all myself, and I just got to the point of I enjoy doing it, but I was getting to the point of I don't enjoy doing this anymore. This is not fun, and it's not my core business. And one of my things when I talk to business owners and talk about when you're starting your business up and running your business is you stick to what you do best. You stick to what brings you the money in the door, what you can do to improve your business. And I had to look at it and have a good hard talk to myself.
Oh, look, I'm a bit the same. I do. With my podcast episodes, I'm like, why don't I use my team to do some of these? And it's just, it's the premise of outsourcing, though, isn't it? Is if it's not in your zone of genius, or don't do it, or take advantage of some of the AI tools that are available today to make that much easier. And it is, I revamped my whole podcast launch training all around the software, because the way I used to teach it is very different to how I teach it now. So it's really interesting, because the tools do or can make a big difference in that process as well.
We'll come back to the tools, and I just wanted to say, but me bringing someone in just to do some of that I'm going to call it the drudge work, and it's not drudge work. It's just what I class as drudge work. It's not what
you want to do. You don't love it.
They love doing it. It took us a little bit, and I had to, and this is something that I really want people sort of to take away, is I had to cost into my time and my budget the fact that I had to train them to do it the way I wanted it done. Because that's a big thing, is people say, oh, but they'll not do it my way. No, they won't. You're right. They won't. Not to begin with. But again, you've got your strategy, and your strategy outlines all of that stuff that you want. You have your graphics, you have your colors, you have the way you want your episodes to appear. You've got to spend the time to go through a couple of edits and let them play a bit and say, yeah, I like that. No, I hate it. No, do not do that again. No, don't do that.
It's so true. Sometimes it's about the outcome, isn't it? And sometimes it doesn't matter how they get there, but you still want to make sure that the processes match.
Do you care what program? I'm like, no, I just want to know what program you're using. And when you upload it, I want the source document. I want the source files. That's important to me, is having all of my assets. It doesn't go off to someone, and I don't know if that's something that you recommend for people or not, but it's important to me is to have all of my source assets, because
Absolutely.
if something goes wrong, I can go back and I've got everything there, and I can either hand it over to someone else or I can learn how to do it myself. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
But I need the source assets. That's just my thing. But it's just made such a difference in my life, because now I've been out and I've been actually being able to do a little bit more strategizing. I've been able to do a little bit more networking and talking to people about coming on and being on the podcast, being able to do the extra episodes that have been going out in between all of them, which is fantastic. So it makes such a difference. But it is a lot of work, and that lot of work meant I wasn't doing other things. So there you go.
And it's still true, even with the AI tools that make it simple or simplify it further, I should say. They don't necessarily make it simple, but they do simplify it further. It's still time. And that's where I think a lot of people in all industries, not just, VAs and podcasters or whatever, in all industries, I think AI is always going to work best with a person who, works with it, not just let's get the AI to do it for us. And so it's still work when you have these tools to simplify the process for you. And so you just need to work out how much of it do you want to do. And if you're starting in business and you've got time to do that and spend, let's be honest, it's probably going to be the better part of half a day at the very least if you're doing everything yourself for an episode. Then if you've got that time, okay, great. And if you don't bang your head against a wall just going, why am I doing this? Great, because you don't want to take away from the fact that the podcast, you could actually love doing the podcast. Like you just said, you could love the podcast but hate doing all the bits that go with it. Don't let the podcast suffer because you don't want to do the bits, I guess is the message there, right? And that's the same with a lot of things in business. Outsource what you don't love doing if you know it needs to be done.
Yep, absolutely. And, again, it comes down to, we're harping on it, it's your strategy. You just got to know what your objectives are. So let's talk about some of the tools, because that's actually really interesting to me. I've looked at a number of tools myself. There are so many out there. Like, I could spend weeks and weeks and weeks looking at things, and don't worry about the time me thing either. That's fine.
That's all right. I didn't know if it was coming up on yours or mine. I was like,
but you can spend weeks and if not months just trying them all out and testing them. And one of the things that I say to people is, don't get distracted by the bright shiny object. Sometimes these tools are going to appear and you need to say to yourself, is this going to be a benefit to me now? I don't know if it's going to be a benefit to me now. Well, go and find someone who you can talk to and get that 10-minute discussion about whether it's worthwhile looking into. But let's talk about some of the tools that are available and what people are using, and what do you recommend they should be using? I'm not asking you to give away all your tips and tricks.
No, that's okay. I don't mind sharing my recommendations. Absolutely. So the interesting thing I'm going to say with podcasting, just to take a step back, is there are many different tools and many different ways to achieve the outcome that we were just saying, to get your audio, let's say, or your video, but for the sake of this, I'll say audio, onto Apple Podcasts. There are so many different ways that you can do it. Don't confuse yourself with going to Google and Googling one question and then YouTubing another question. Follow one person's resource, advice, checklist, whatever it is, training course, and work through their process, because the outcome will be the same. So that's my first piece of advice. I've worked with clients that have come to me and said, I Googled this and they said do this, and then I did something else and they said do this, and then they've started along the process and then just completely confused themselves and got overwhelmed. So some of the tools I would recommend now, if you're going to do video and audio, then I would suggest you find an editor that is easy to use if you're going to self-edit, because that one part of the process is something that a lot of people will outsource or not want to do, is just that editing. They might be happy to do all the rest of the process. Over the years, the editing is the one thing I've found that people say, that's not my zone of genius. Do I want to go and spend time with it? Probably not. So they'll either outsource it They used to outsource it. Now they're looking at tools that make it easier. And the one tool that has really come on in leaps and bounds, even in the last 12 months, is Descript. So Descript, yep. And I'll send through a link. You can put that in the show notes or whatever. Descript is actually a tool that you can import your audio and video into. It will bring it all up as the timeline file. So you've got the WAV file down the bottom to edit, and you've also got the transcript that you can use to edit. So if there's a section that we've talked about, Charly, and you go, I don't really want that in there, you just highlight the transcript. It might be 5 minutes in the transcript and hit delete and it's gone.
Takes it out of the video and the audio.
And the transcript, yep. It's still there for you to get back if you want to get back. It's changing the game in podcasting.
Oh, my goodness.
Game changer. Now, if you're a podcaster who learned how to use an audio editor where there's no text base, it is actually, the audio file, there's a lot more, I'm going to say there's probably a lot more effects and things that you can do in those. So I used to teach people for a free editor, Audacity is a great piece of equipment to start with. And I say start with, and people still use it years and years after. Yep. It's great. It can do things.
It's an amazing piece of software.
It is. And it can do things that Descript can't do. So being that I work with both, so I have that advantage of knowing that. But if you don't know how Audacity works, I would be saying don't go and learn that. Go and use Descript because you can actually use the words. Now, sometimes it cuts off in breaths and it's really messy and you have to go and tidy it up. I would never say just take out those bits and just play and it's ready to go. It removes filler words. Now, this is probably the biggest game changer. If you've ever listened to an interview where someone has a guest on or you have a bad day, there are some episodes I have removed 200 ums and ahs. No. I'm talking hundreds of them. I always used to leave mine in before I used Descript, and I still do leave. Actually, I've probably gotten a little bit better with my speaking that I have been able to not say them as much. But Descript is literally a right click, remove all the ums. They're gone. So if you are a prolific ummer or you have a guest on that ums a lot, you can fix that. If you do it every now and then, I don't think that you need to take them all out. I'm that person that's going to say if you don't need to have that highly polished production, then don't stress too much about it. But if you are somebody that has that catch of, over the years I've worked with clients, they'll say, okay, mine is, or mine is sort of.
Or
mine is so and now. And that's what I've replaced my ums with. So I know mine, but it's really interesting. You can go and use a tool like Descript to remove all of those filler words for you. But as I said, I'd always listen to where it's taken it out because it won't remove all of them. But you can also then go and edit on the timeline at the bottom. And Descript have also taken over and bought Squadcast. So that's a recording platform like Zoom or Zencaster. And so you can actually, as part of your subscription for Descript, have your recording platform to do solo episodes and guests, video and audio that feeds straight into Descript. We'll transcribe it, edit it. You can put your intro and outro on. You can actually export it from Descript straight into your podcast hosting platform, depending on who you use. So that's kind of taken 6 different steps out of the process. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It really is. Yeah. And it's a game changer. And Riverside FM is very similar. Mm-hmm. And it has the recording functionality, it has the transcript, edit, text based, and you can do your audiograms from there. You can do your video snippets from there. You can ask AI to write your show notes in there. You can ask AI to write your social media posts. It is an all-in-one platform. And so it really has changed. It's changed the game big time in podcasting in the last few years.
And honestly, look, I've looked at Riverside. I've got to say, I'm a big one on costs, and I was looking at the cost of it, going, no, I've got all these other platforms that I've been using, and I need to consolidate, not add more to it.
Yes.
But
and see, because you've been using them previously, and because you've been using the other tools previously, and you've almost spent the time learning how to use them as well. Podcasters who already have their process down pat don't necessarily need to be looking at these tools. But if you're coming into the game now, you are going to have to spend some time getting familiar with the tools, particularly if you want to self-edit, because that takes time. Regardless of whether you do a nice, easy edit or not, it does take time, and you want to make sure you've got good audio quality. And so it's just, weighing up do you go for a subscription like that has the all-in-one, as opposed to learning the 4 or 5 different tools that you need to make sure you get the same outcome. So again, it's the same outcome, but it's just, if you're starting now, I think there's different ways to do it.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to highlight in all of that is, like I said, I'm cost sensitive, but I've got my investment in what I've done. So that's where my cost sensitivity comes in as well. Don't think that you can get away with doing this at no cost, because even if you use free tools to do this, those free tools, the offset of that is your own time and your own energy, because you're going to have to learn how to use them. You're going to have to spend the time using them. You're going to have to spend the time when things go wrong, because they're free tools. And I don't want to sort of bash on free platforms and such, but they don't have as much money to put into the maintenance and the investment of it. And 9 times out of 10, if I have had a problem with something and I've gone back and said, this isn't working, they said, well, you're on the free platform. If you need this to work, you need to upgrade. So
and it's interesting that you say that. Yes, and it is so true what you've just said there is, if you've got to go and I love Audacity. If you've got to go and get Audacity and learn how to use it, it's your time to learn how to use it. And it also, you'll come back to, it's going to take you hours of editing time if you want to try and remove all the ums and ahs and the sort ofs and the you knows, if you're going to use a platform like that that's not a text-based editor. And so it really does come back to, is that important for you or is it not? Because the editing time traditionally was 3 times longer than your episode. So if you've got an hour's interview, it's about 3 times the amount if you're going to edit and do all the ums and ahs and all of the bits and pieces. And that adds up really quickly if that's just the editing component of your episode of a week, and you've spoken to someone for an hour or 2 for the actual recording. There's 5 hours before you've done any of the graphic or the show notes or anything like that.
Yep, I agree entirely. And like I said, I love Audacity. It's a fantastic tool. I rarely use it now, though. I don't need to, because there's other tools that have replaced it for me. So we've got Descript, which you love. Was it not Riverside FM? What was the Descript side of that?
Descript is, when you sign up for Descript, you get Squadcast. So that is similar to the Riverside FM, where you get the recording and the editing as well. Zoom, if you use Zoom, they've kept up with the game. They've actually got functionality in it that they've added in. Now, I'm not sure if it's available on the free platform, because I do a lot on Zoom. So I have a paid platform, but I have a dog next door that barks incessant all the time. Like, it's crazy. It's like, oh my gosh, if I was recording a solo episode into Audacity, I would have to do a fair bit of noise reduction to get that dog barking out. Using Zoom and a lot of the platforms, I think you mentioned it before, it actually has a functionality in there that knocks the background noise out before, and that dog can bark now, and I can talk to people and they can't even hear it. And like, that's amazing. So there's tools like Zoom, there's other recording tools as well. Of course, there's AI, like any of your Chat GTP, any of the programs that you use to help you outline your script. To not write the script for you, even come up with, here's my episode. This is what my podcast is about. This is who it's for. Come up with an outline for an episode about this topic, and it will rattle off some points for you to cover in that episode. Using it for content planning. What do I want to talk about on my podcast? Okay, we'll go into an AI tool. This is what my podcast is about. This is who it's for. Give me 50 ideas of what to use. So using the AI tools in your planning is a really great way to do it. Helping you if you want to help it with the show notes. You can go in and ask them to write show notes. There's a lot of platforms that do the transcript now, so you have got Descript and Riverside that will, but you also have Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. They do the transcript after it's been published.
Yep.
And so you can get that AI.
Spotify does that natively now. Like when I upload my episodes there, it's like, well, we're going to give you this transcript. Oh, okay.
Absolutely. And they're pretty good. I mean, compared to you and I have been around in the VA industry for a while, right? So there was some terrible AI transcript options around. I don't know that some of them have gotten any better. I'm not sure. But in actual fact, the ones that come out from Spotify and Apple are really good. And here's a tip here is if you don't put them on your website because you don't get it before you do publish your episode, go and download it from Apple or go and download it from Spotify and then go and put it on your website, because then you'll get website SEO benefits as well.
Good point. Great point. Okay, so you mentioned the AI tools, the GPTs and stuff, and we were having a bit of a rant before we came on the call about using AI. I'll admit I use it, and I use it just as you suggested there. But let's talk about some of those strategies for podcasters. And I'm going to start it by saying I put out daily episodes of business inspiration tips. So it's your daily dose of business inspiration, and they go out daily. It's really hard to come up with a new topic every day. So I sat down one Friday afternoon, I sat down with my glass of wine and I got onto ChatGPT and I said, I'm a business podcaster. I like to give out daily inspirational tips. The videos are about 6 minutes long. Give me 30 topics to talk about. And they went, here.
Yep.
And I'm going to do that again at the beginning of next month, because that's going to.
I'd always be saying, give me 100. Give me 100 topics to talk about, because it's probably not going to repeat the topics it might have done last month. So,
good point.
Because some of them you're going to look at and go, okay, that's not relevant. Cross it out. Oh, yep, that's a good one. So you might not use a third of what it spits out and gives you as the. But other times it's like, oh, I didn't even think of using that one. But it's just it helps with your planning. It's all there to help you, isn't it? And it's not going to go away. So why don't we embrace it and use it? And sometimes I have complete mind blanks, and I think, oh, I could go in and ask. I even use it for my episode titles. What's a better way for me to give me 5 ideas on the episode title for this? And it'll give me 5 ideas. And generally what I find I do is I actually pull a little bit from 2 of them. I go, yeah, I kind of like that, but I don't like the way it is in full, and I'll put them together and it gives me ideas for that. So AI in the planning is really good. You've got the AI tool in Descript in itself. As I say, it is better for you to actually use it with the AI functionality by listening and making sure you're not cutting off a breath halfway through and things like that. But then there's tools afterwards in the post-production that can really simplify your process as well. And I don't know how you do your daily tool, your daily podcast, and if it has music involved in it or not. But I would certainly be saying, once you put it into a tool, like I'd be using a tool that adds your intro and outro automatically. I would run it through probably something like Auphonic that adds the intro, outro, does all the leveling, gets all of the volume right for podcasts, and will actually publish onto your episode for you. So all you've done is record it and upload it, and it's all done. It's all pushed out for you.
You need to send me a link for that, those ones.
And if they're short podcasts, I think you get up to 2 hours for free. But it's an AI tool that actually polishes. It started out as a AI editing tool that kind of just polished that audio for you after you'd done your Audacity edit, put it through Auphonic and just use the leveling and the volume, because you know what it's like when you listen to a podcast and the guest is at a different level to the host. That shouldn't be happening now, because tools can level that for you. You don't have to do that manually. So, yeah, there's lots of different little tips and tricks. Zapier can be your friend with a lot of the podcasting processes as well, because a lot of them do talk to each other. So hosts will talk to things like Descript and and or Phonic. But if they don't, then you can also use Zapier to connect things as well.
Awesome. Look, there's some great hints and tips. So, look, I know I booked you for about an hour, and I think we've been going for a little bit more than that. What I'd like to quickly do, if you don't mind, is just pull up my notes again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I take notes. I'm sorry, I do notes, guys.
That's right.
I'd like to just invite.
Do you know what I love though is that you actually this is part of what we were talking about, is you happy to say that into your episodes, because this is your you know, you're being open, you're transparent, and that's part of it.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to invite people across to my locals community. Being a business owner can be tough. Being a business owner who works remotely can get lonely and frustrating. That's why I started the community, a community for business owners that could be a little bit like that water cooler of old. I want you to treat my locals community as a place where you not only get to interact with me, but with each other. You can gain inspiration, provide inspiration and advice, ask for help. And of course, you'll be able to ask questions of myself while you're over there. So come on over and join me at askcharlyleetham.locals.com. And back to us. I learned that from one of the podcast hosts I listen to. Back to us.
I love it. And let's bring it back to the room.
So Lyndal, how can people find out about you? Where to get in touch with you? What's the best way?
I'm pretty active on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram to a degree, and also on Facebook. I have a community of Australian podcasters. So it's called the Australian Podcasters Collaborative. It is for people who are thinking about launching a show right through to seasoned podcasters. So if you're interested in joining that, it's just a place where you can ask questions and join the conversation. But you can reach out any which way, send me a DM, check out my website, however you would like to. I would love to see people in the community if they're interested in podcasting though.
Fantastic. Well, what I'm going to do is put all of that in the show notes below here, guys. So if you want to go and join Lyndal, I'm certainly going to come across and have a look at your podcasting group. It's always nice to find people to talk with. It's important, I think. Now, what's one thing you want people to take away from today?
I would love for people to take away that you can use audio and video in your business in a way that is successful, that is not an ongoing weekly, fortnightly show. If that's too much for you, there are different ways to use it, and really have a think about how you can implement it into your marketing activities. So it's not something extra that you're doing, but something that's incorporated with all of your marketing.
Fantastic. That is great advice. All righty. Well, look, I am going to wrap us up here. I want to thank you so much for being on the show and sharing so openly with all of your thoughts there. I hope you've had a good time. Guys, please remember, let me see if I can get this right. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you find out when I put up more content. If you can leave a review, please leave a review. It does help. And maybe share this episode with someone else. If it's not what you wanted to hear today, maybe someone else does want to hear it and it will help them out as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you all next week.
See you.